Well, hello there. Welcome to my castle. I am Dr. Baron Frederick Von Frankenstein, and I welcome you to my home. Please sit down. I've never done any of these kind of things before, so let me get to know you about myself. My great grandfather was Baron Wolfwood von Frankenstein, the last well known Baron of the castle, and my grandfather, which would be his son, was Victor Frankenstein. Apparently, my grandfather Victor brought shame to this household by dwelling in experiments, which some say went against God's laws. He stumbled across a secret so great it would have made God jealous. Apparently, he constructed a tall figure, inside a hidden laboratory within the castle itself. A man made creature, a monster. I never, I don't really know what this creature looked like when I first came to this castle. Apparently, I was my great grandfather's only heir he can trust. So he left me both the fortune and the castle in his name, and left everybody else out. And they all thought they were going to get a fair share of part of the inheritance of this great place here in Transylvania. So here's the thing, I was born in the United States. I later became a physician and surgeon myself, like my grandfather Victor, but had no interest in following in his footsteps until one night when I first spent my first night here in the castle. So I'm not just a physician. I even taught at the university. So let me get to the bottom, get to the bottom of all this. Make this simple as possible. One day, while giving a lecture on the brain and the spine, one of my own students brought up my grandfather's past, and he even addressed me by my actual birth name, which I didn't feel comfortable going by that name for a while. So I went from Frankenstein to Frankenstein. Even though it sounds similar, I just don't want to be reminded of my grandfather's past. So my student brought up my grandfather's past, like I just mentioned, over the experiments of reanimating dead tissue, and I've had to make argument that it's impossible, even though I denied it, and said my own grandfather's work was doo doo. I got so angry I picked up the scalpel on the table next to me, just to make a point, saying you that you have a good chance of reanimating a scalpel off the table and getting it to dance on its own. The anger I got to the point when I was telling my student that it was impossible, and at that point, grabbed the scalpel and stabbed myself in the thigh. Didn't even feel anything. Once I dismissed the class, my grandfather's lawyer came up to me with a chest containing the will of my great grandfather Beaufort's will, telling me that I was his only heir to the family fortune and the estate. And then I yanked the scalpel out of my thigh. Still didn't feel anything. So once I was told, I packed my bags, kissed my dear fiancee Elizabeth goodbye until she later met with me at the castle. Once I was there, I was met by my new assistant, Igor, which I thought was Igor. His grandfather, too, worked for my grandfather as well in the experiments of life and death. So we had to get to the castle by horse and buggy once I was dropped off at the train station. And there, within the buggy itself, filled with straw, met my new laboratory assistant as well. Actually, I had two assistants, Igor and this young lady, who is now my wife, Inga. So we traveled through the dark forest for a couple of hours until we saw the estate up on a dark hill. Once we got to the front door, I was met by my grandfather's housemaid, Frau Blucher. That's odd. Anytime I mention my housemaid's name, the horses would start to act up. First, usually they do act up while she's not home, so I sent her into the village to get things for dinner tonight. So once I went to bed, hearing the sound of a violin being played throughout the whole castle, Ina comes into my room feeling scared. So we tried to figure out where the sound was coming from, and it seemed to come right behind the bookcase. So we tried to figure out where to open it. That was my main guess, because I began to suspect my grandfather had something hidden. I knew for a fact my grandfather had a secret library. So while we're trying to find a secret passageway, I picked up one of the candles hanging above to see where to find a switch, and all of a sudden the shelf spun around and I got caught in it. Inga release, quickly helped me get me released from the bookshelf, and we went right through. There we later met up with Igor, who just completely scared the living hell out of both of us. And then we went into another room where the sound was coming closer. Once we entered the next room, that was pitch black. I had Igor flip the switch that shot off sparks and quickly lit up. And there, out of nowhere, completely, my total shock, was my grandfather's laboratory, the place where it all happened. And then down the steps, we saw another door on the other side of the lab. We could see light shining from the bottom. Once we got in there, we saw nothing but books and papers. And then also there on the table was a violin and a half-smoked cigar. So, sure enough, I found my grandfather's secret library, and right there on the table was his journal titled How I Did It by Victor Frankenstein. So I spent the last few hours reading his entire journal throughout the night. Right away, I went completely insane, and I knew right away I was destined to follow in his footsteps. So the next night, Igor and I set out to the village cemetery. We realized that a prisoner had been hung and quickly buried. Once the guard and the two prisoners finished burying the executed individual, we quickly dug up the body. And Igor, with his big mouth, had to say this. Well, could be worse. I asked him what. Could be raining. And then a second, comes down pouring hard. I wasn't too pleased. Once we got back to the castle, we began working on the deceased man. The thing was, we had to stretch his skin and all limbs and bones to make him look taller. And then I had Igor do the one thing I needed him to do, which was to give me a brain. And I needed the brain of a genius, a man by the name of, trying to think, Hans Delbruck. That was the name of the deceased man whose brain I needed. So once Igor returned, I had the brain already in place. And within the next few hours, the storm had begun over the mountains. And there, on that cold and stormy night, I had both of my assistants lift me in my new creation on the platform, raised us both up to the top of, raised us both on top of the roof to the skylight, right there. The electric ray to do the job was already set in motion. I had Igor flip the first switch already. The first bolt of electric power went right into the monster's torso. I needed more power. I had him flip the second switch, giving it more of a boost. And then finally, I needed him to flip the third and final switch. He tells me, not the third switch. And I told him right away to throw it. I'm surprised that the switch on this underneath said it works. Pretty odd. He flips it. All of a sudden, half the equipment starts exploding, sending as much power into the body. And then, as the storm increased, I could see the monster's head start to glow like a light bulb. I saw it glow twice, knowing the life was being poured. Once I told them to switch it off and bring us both down, I tried to see if any progress had been made. I thought I failed. I was so mad I just wanted to rip that body apart. The next day, well, the next night, I would say, sitting there at dinner, pouting, thought that I had failed. And as we later got into dessert, I heard a loud growl. I thought it was my assistant making a yummy noise, and as it grew louder, we knew it came from the lab. So we went downstairs into the lab and saw that my creation had been alive. This was perfect, just as I had hoped for. And then, after that brute nearly killed me, I heard a knock on the door. I had the I had the brute sedated, so I had to quickly go upstairs and see who it was. Turns out it was the local police inspector, Inspector Kemp, who came to see me, asking me if I'd been following in my late grandfather's footsteps. I denied it, even though a lot of odd things had happened within the last few hours, and of course, hearing another growl coming from the lab. The inspector thought I did it. No, I may think it was me. And then went back to the lab, and I noticed Frau Blocher attempting to release him from the operating table while struck down completely. I told her to stop, but then all of a sudden, she broke out. Luckily, she managed to handle the situation herself, picking up the violin and playing that Transylvanian lullaby to get her to calm down. And I realized it was her all along playing the music, lured us into the lab, left the cigar and the violin down in the library, leaving my grandfather's diary to find it, and realizing the whole time this was all for me to just to follow in his footsteps, bringing it to life. And then monster accidentally flips one of the switches, sending sparks rushing out of the castle and into the night. The goal was to catch him and bring him back before he hurt someone. Luckily, within the next few hours, me managed to trap him in a fish net and sedate him once more. I tried to present to the village my progress, what my grandfather had accomplished. We put on a little dance show, and all of a sudden, one of the light bulbs broke, and he got scared, and of course, went out of control again. So he was held as a prisoner in the police station. While trying to figure out what to do, I noticed that my fiancée Elizabeth had arrived to try to keep things quiet without letting her know. And then had to let her know the whole detail of what happened. And then within a few hours, I hear that he had broken loose. Now he's on the run. So once again, I had to try to lure him back here to the castle. I had to play the violin up on the roof to lure him back here so I can help him once more. Once we lured him back here into the castle by the sound of the violin, there was one thing to help him with his mind. I had to share half of my brain with him. Putting this helmet on my head with holes in it attached to tubes and sent parts of my brain to him. But then all of a sudden the villagers broke in and broke the machine. But gratefully, we succeeded. The monster now has intelligence, normal intelligence. I still have my usual intelligence, but have gained some side effects from him. I become him. So at the end, my creation marries my now ex-fiancee Elizabeth, and I've married my assistant Inga. So anytime I hear that violin playing playing the lullaby, I start to turn into him. As you can see, I'm still suffering from the effects. Still no damage after that one night. Well, so now you know my full story. I hope this was an experience for you here in my beautiful home. And it was great to have a visitor come see me for once. I hope this was a great tale to tell you and kind of frightening. I hope you come and visit me another time. And don't worry, I won't act out of control or do anything to you. I promise you that. Well, thank you for coming over, my friend. Have a good evening. Take care.